What if I told you that Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, the man who had everything fame, fortune, millions of adoring fans, spent his entire life haunted by a ghost? Not a supernatural ghost, but something far more painful. The ghost of his identical twin brother. A brother he never met. A brother who took his last breath before Elvis took his first. A brother whose death left a wound so deep, so permanent, that many believe it ultimately contributed to Elvis's own tragic downfall. His name was Garon Presley, and for 42 years, Elvis carried him everywhere he went, in his heart, in his mind, and in his tortured soul. Most people know Elvis as the hip-shaking, lip-curling icon who changed music forever. But very few people know about the devastating tragedy that shaped him from the moment he entered this world. A tragedy that his own mother reminded him of almost every single day of his childhood. A tragedy that made Elvis believe he was living for two people, and that he owed the world twice as much because of it. Tonight, we're going to uncover the heartbreaking story of Garon Presley, the twin brother who died at birth and left Elvis with a lifetime of guilt, loneliness, and an identity crisis that he could never escape. This is not just a story about death. This is a story about how one loss can define an entire life, how survivors' guilt can poison success, and how the king of rock and roll was never truly whole because half of him was buried in an unmarked grave in Tupelo, Mississippi. By the end of this video, you will never look at Elvis Presley the same way again. Before we dive deep into this haunting story, I need you to do something for me. If you're fascinated by the hidden stories behind famous people, the stories they don't teach you in school, then hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell. I promise you, this channel is going to change the way you see history. And drop a comment below telling me, did you know Elvis had a twin brother? I want to know how many of you are learning this for the very first time. All right, let's get into it. But first, the backstory. Because to truly understand how Jesse's death destroyed Elvis, you need to understand the world Elvis was born into. A world of poverty, desperation, and a mother whose love was so intense, it bordered on obsession. The year was 1935. The Great Depression had America in a chokehold. Families were starving, jobs were impossible to find, and in the poorest part of Tupelo, Mississippi, a young couple named Vernon and Gladys Presley were about to experience the greatest joy and the greatest tragedy of their lives on the exact same night. Gladys Presley was only 22 years old and pregnant with twins. The family had almost nothing. Vernon worked odd jobs when he could find them, barely scraping together enough money to survive. They lived in a tiny two-room shotgun house that Vernon had built with his own hands and borrowed money, a house so small you could walk from one end to the other in about 10 steps. There was no hospital for the Presleys, no fancy doctors, no modern medical equipment. When Gladys went into labor on that freezing January night, a local physician named Dr. William Robert Hunt came to their little shack to deliver the babies. At around 4 o'clock in the morning on January 8, 1935, the first baby arrived. It was a boy, but something was terribly wrong. The baby was not breathing. He was not crying. His tiny body was still and silent. Garon Presley was stillborn. Dr. Hunt did everything he could to save the baby, but it was too late. The little boy had died sometime during the delivery or perhaps even before. The exact cause of death was never fully determined. Some say the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. Others believe he simply wasn't strong enough to survive. Gladys was devastated, but she had no time to grieve because exactly 35 minutes later, at 4:35 a.m., the second baby arrived. This one was alive. This one was screaming. This one was fighting. They named him Elvis Aaron Presley, and from that moment forward, Elvis would carry the weight of his brother's death on his shoulders for the rest of his life. Now, here's where the story takes a dark turn. Because what happened in that little house in Tupelo didn't just affect Elvis physically, it shaped his entire psychology, his entire identity, and ultimately, his entire destiny. Jesse was buried the very next day in an unmarked grave at Priceville Cemetery in Tupelo. The Presleys were too poor to afford a proper headstone, too poor to give their firstborn son a dignified resting place. For decades, Jesse lay in that cemetery with nothing to mark his existence except the memories of his grieving parents. But Gladys Presley never forgot. And she made absolutely sure that Elvis never forgot either. From the moment Elvis was old enough to understand, Gladys began talking to him about Jesse. She told him stories about the brother he never knew. She took him to visit Jesse's grave regularly, sometimes weekly. She would kneel beside the unmarked patch of earth and weep, and little Elvis would watch, not fully understanding why his mother was so sad. But it was what Gladys told Elvis that would haunt him forever. She told him that when a twin dies, the surviving twin inherits all of their brother's strength, all of their talents, all of their potential. She told Elvis that he was special because he was living for two people now. That God had taken Jesse but left Elvis for a reason. That Elvis had a destiny to fulfill not just for himself, but for his dead brother too. Can you imagine hearing that as a child? Being told that you survived while your identical twin died, that you now carry the responsibility of two lives, that you owe the world something because your brother didn't make it. This is what psychologists today call survivor's guilt, and Elvis had one of the most severe cases imaginable. As Elvis grew older, his relationship with Jesse became even more complicated. He didn't just feel guilty about surviving, he felt incomplete. He often spoke about feeling like half a person, like something essential was missing from his soul. He believed that Jesse was still with him, watching over him, guiding him. In private moments, Elvis would actually talk to Jesse. He would have conversations with his dead twin, asking for guidance, asking for forgiveness, asking if Jesse was proud of him. Friends and family members who witnessed these moments said it was both beautiful and heartbreaking. "I think about him every single day," Elvis once confessed in a rare interview. "I always wonder what he would have been like. Would we have looked exactly alike? Would we have had the same voice? Would he have been the famous one instead of me?" This last question reveals something profound about Elvis's psychology. He didn't just miss his brother, he wondered if the wrong twin had survived. He wondered if Jesse was supposed to be the star and Elvis was just the backup plan. Gladys reinforced this complex emotional relationship. She was an incredibly overprotective mother, almost suffocatingly so. She and Elvis had an unusual bond that many people found disturbing. They would kiss on the lips. They had their own secret language. They were practically inseparable. Psychologists who have studied Elvis's relationship with his mother believe that Gladys transferred some of her grief for Jesse onto Elvis. She clung to Elvis because she was terrified of losing him too. She smothered him with love because she felt guilty for not being able to save Jesse. And in doing so, she created a deeply codependent relationship that would affect Elvis's ability to form healthy relationships for the rest of his life. When Gladys died in 1958, Elvis was absolutely shattered. He was only 23 years old and already one of the most famous people on the planet. But none of that mattered. He collapsed at her funeral. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. Friends said he was never the same again. "I lost my best friend," Elvis said. "I lost the only person who truly understood me." But here's the thing, when Elvis lost Gladys, he didn't just lose his mother. He lost his connection to Jesse. Gladys was the keeper of Jesse's memory. She was the one who told the stories, who maintained the grave, who kept the twin brother alive in spirit. With her gone, Elvis felt more alone than ever. And this is when Elvis's slow decline began. Now let's talk about the theories and revelations that make this story even more fascinating and more disturbing. Several psychologists and Elvis biographers have proposed that Elvis developed a kind of split identity because of Jesse's death. Part of him was Elvis the shy, polite mama's boy from Mississippi. But another part of him was what he imagined Jesse would have been: wild, rebellious, uninhibited. When Elvis performed on stage, he transformed into someone completely different. The hip shaking, the provocative dancing, the animalistic energy, this wasn't the real Elvis. Many believe this was Elvis channeling what he imagined Jesse would have been. It was his way of letting his twin brother live through him. This would explain why Elvis often seemed confused about his own identity, why he surrounded himself with people but still felt utterly alone, why he could have thousands of fans screaming his name but still feel like nobody truly saw him. "There's two sides to me," Elvis once said. "There's the shy, quiet boy from Tupelo, and then there's the performer, the one who comes alive on stage. Sometimes I don't know which one is the real me." What if neither was the real Elvis? What if he spent his whole life trying to be two people at once? Another theory suggests that Elvis's obsession with success was driven by his need to prove that Jesse's death was not in vain. If Jesse died so that Elvis could live, then Elvis had to make that sacrifice worth something. He had to be extraordinary. He had to be legendary. He had to be the king. This created an impossible standard that Elvis could never truly meet. No matter how famous he became, no matter how many records he sold, no matter how many movies he made, it was never enough. Because how do you justify being alive when your twin brother is dead? How much success is enough to make up for that? This relentless drive may have contributed to Elvis's workaholic tendencies, his perfectionism, and his inability to ever feel satisfied with his achievements. Now, this is where things get really dark. Elvis's drug abuse is well documented. He became addicted to prescription medications in his later years, uppers to keep him going, downers to help him sleep. His drug use ultimately contributed to his death at the age of 42. But why did Elvis turn to drugs in the first place? Some experts believe that Elvis was trying to numb the pain of survivor's guilt and the emptiness he felt from losing Jesse. He was trying to escape the constant voice in his head that told him he should have died instead. He was trying to fill the void that had existed since the moment he was born. When you look at Elvis's drug use through this lens, it becomes less about recreation and more about desperation. He wasn't partying, he was self-medicating for a wound that no doctor could heal. Elvis was a deeply spiritual person. He studied religion extensively, not just Christianity, but also Eastern philosophies, numerology, and metaphysical concepts. He was fascinated by the idea of the soul and what happens after death. Many of Elvis's closest friends have reported that he genuinely believed Jesse was with him in spirit. He didn't just talk to Jesse as a coping mechanism, he believed Jesse actually responded. He felt his presence in quiet moments. He believed that Jesse guided him in making decisions. Larry Geller, Elvis's hairdresser and spiritual advisor, once revealed that Elvis had told him, "Jesse is always with me. He's my guardian angel. Whenever I'm in trouble, I can feel him there telling me what to do." Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, the fact that Elvis believed this tells us something important about his psychological state. He never let Jesse go. He never moved on. He couldn't. For over 40 years, Jesse Garon Presley lay in an unmarked grave in Priceville Cemetery. Can you imagine? The twin brother of the most famous entertainer in the world, buried with no headstone, no marker, nothing to indicate that a baby was buried there. It wasn't until the 1990s, years after Elvis himself had died, that fans raised money to place a proper marker on Jesse's grave. Today, the grave reads, Jesse Garon Presley, January 8, 1935. But here's the strange part. Some researchers have questioned whether Jesse is actually buried at Priceville Cemetery. The records from 1935 are incomplete and confusing. Some documents suggest Jesse was buried elsewhere. Others suggest there may have never been a proper burial at all. We may never know the full truth about what happened to Jesse's remains. But what we do know is that his short existence, just 35 minutes before Elvis, changed the course of music history. Here's something that will send chills down your spine. Elvis Presley died on August 16, 1977. He was 42 years old. Many people have noted the haunting significance of this number. Elvis lived for 42 years, and throughout those 42 years, he felt like he was living for two people. Himself and Jesse. 42 divided by 2 equals 21. If Elvis had only lived for himself, if he hadn't been carrying the weight of his twin brother's death, would he have lived twice as long? Or was 42 years all that Elvis could handle while carrying the burden of two souls? We'll never know, but the symmetry is haunting. When Elvis died, some say he finally reunited with Jesse. The twin brothers, separated at birth by death, were finally together again. So what do you think? Do you believe that Jesse's death truly haunted Elvis for his entire life? Do you think the survivor's guilt contributed to Elvis's drug abuse and early death? Or is this all just speculation, a romanticized version of a simple childhood tragedy? And here's an even deeper question. If Jesse had survived, would Elvis have become the king of rock and roll, or would he have been just another singer from Mississippi? Did Elvis's loneliness, his drive, his desperate need to prove himself, did all of that come from the hole that Jesse left behind? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let's have a real conversation about this. I read every single comment, and I respond to as many as I can. And if this video moved you, if you learned something new about Elvis today, then do me a favor, hit that like button. It takes 1 second and it helps this video reach more people who need to hear this story. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? I make videos about the hidden stories behind famous people, unsolved mysteries, and forgotten history. If that sounds interesting to you, join the family. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Before you go, I have a question for you. Whose hidden story should I cover next? What celebrity, what historical figure, what mystery do you want me to investigate? Let me know in the comments because your suggestions literally become my future videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And thank you for caring about the stories that history forgot. Until next time.